You're listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature.
Hi, this is Father Mark Boulos, and you are listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature podcast. Years ago, when I worked in the city, I took perverse pleasure in the prophetic absurdity of a small, dilapidated, prewar brownstone jutting out against the pristine, monied plaza of the towers, built, as money does, to cover the ugliness of human sin with the vanity of majesty and looks. It was an ugly, filthy box with fire escapes and all. I used to look to see if I could find an old Greek woman running a clothesline to hang dirty underwear out to dry for all the wealthy brokers to see. People who made their living funding all the genocides the Western media has long since perfected hiding from us. But I could never find that underwear. Alas, the brownstone is gone, but the underwear is finally on display. That church was not built by Greek sailors. It was camped in. It was an old brownstone that people prayed in. It was a tent of meeting, and it was a threat to the city elite, to people who worship money. It was ugly on the outside and beautiful on the inside. I remember in Romania we had a class on Christian architecture. How, Father Paul asks, could architecture be Christian? How, indeed. I mean, the dome is Roman, Greco-Roman. It's not Christian. The Orthodox like to speak about the dome, heaven descending upon earth. In the West, in Europe, they like much more the spires, going up to God. Ultimately, you start theologizing the stone. Stones, rubble, the stuff left over after clergy bless bombs with holy water, or politicians scribble little hearts with love notes like, finish them. That's what happens when you start theologizing stones. I prefer praying in pre-war brownstones, or whatever is available, free of charge, with a charge. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. I am honored to introduce Father Paul on the Bible as Literature podcast, Tarazi Tuesdays.
Herod and the Sadducees, with the collapse of the temple, they were eliminated. But theology continues. Take most recently the shrine of St. Nicholas. It was destroyed. And then instead of the little shrine, a huge basilica was built next to the one tower instead of the two towers. These things you can always manage. But what pushes this is usually the thought. Take even in architecture. The Orthodox like to speak about the dome, heaven descending upon earth. And in the West, in Europe, they like much more the spires, going up to God. And so just hear it from the people. And thus, ultimately, you start theologizing the stone. I mean, I remember in Romania we had a class on Christian architecture. How could architecture be Christian? I mean, the dome is Roman, Greco-Roman, is not Christian. And I mentioned to you last time that the trouble, especially with the Greeks, they are not Greek Orthodox, they are Orthodox Greeks. The noun is Greek, and Orthodox is an adjective. That's why they refer to Plato, Aristotle, Achilles, Agamemnon, and so on, together with Paul and Chrysostom and so on. And I'm sure most of you have heard about the famous Moldavian iconography, where you begin from the outside with the philosophers. Actually, in one of the churches in Brumana in Lebanon, you have the philosophers on the outside, obviously. I mean, you try to fool the people. And then you go in and you culminate in Jesus, the son of David, and so on. But that goes along this line that was developed in Alexandria, which is the most irritating for me, that Greek philosophy prepared the Greeks the way the Torah prepared Israel/the Jews, which is abominable. It's anti-letter to the Romans. But that's how things went into the business. And going back to the Christians, you have Justin. I remember a student of mine used to tease me by saying he was Palestinian. I said, yeah, he was a Greek Palestinian, not an Arab Palestinian, because he was from Nablus, the town of my mother, and so on. Then it was developed and culminated in this writer from the 6th century that spoke about how God is a logos that is revealed in the logi, and he stresses the importance of the words logi. And thus, everything is in the mind. Take, for instance, let's go for the bishop. He doesn't work. He doesn't prepare his own breakfast, except Patriarch Ignatius, whose breakfast was olives and labneh. But, and he talks, and people serve him and so on, and that's the way it is. And most of their talk is about the eternal logos. I mean, you know that so many times you and I have mentioned. All you have to do is to listen to the Doxastica and then the Theotokia and so on. It shows all on this level. There is nothing practical. And then salvation happens like that you feel saved. Even on this point, and that's my criticism against the people that I admire, the Quakers and so on. But they stress this teaching. Remember, with a good friend of mine who is Quaker, I said, that's my bone of contention with you, that you stress that. This is the way of man. You have it already in Herod and the Sadducees, as reflected in the story of Cain, and then in chapter 11 and the Tower of Babel. But later you have always the wise and so on. That's why the 2 books of Daniel and then Joseph in Genesis is a hit, not only against earthly power, as in the case of Joseph, but he was the wise person. And Daniel revisits this story and develops it as being overarching over human history until the end of times, because all this is put in a book. that will be opened at the end to judge everybody. But then all this is hijacked, and that's how I look at theology. It hijacked the Bible, and you could see everything start. It's about God and so on, and who is God and what is God, and God cannot do such things, and he does only these things. And that is the other aspect that we must develop in the book, that it has to be an attack. And then on the practical level, anything that reflects human production, whether in stone or in ideas. That's why very often I speak about the electronic temples for God. And all this points to the realization of humans. I mean, the Basilica of St. Peter and then the Basilica of Hagia Sophia. I mean, it's not God who contracted that. God deals with a tent and so on. And we don't shy from that. Actually, we even impose it about the understanding of the image of God, and not functional as you are responsible for creation, but essential. Notice how, especially Orthodox theology, play on the two words, which is usually a Semitic way of underlining the image and the likeness. Suddenly the image is never lost, it is in us, but we have to yearn and work towards the likeness. As you could see, the arrogance. And that's how we ended up with understanding, and these people will inherit the kingdom. It becomes to possess it. You know that. I mean, that's all of us talk like that. We equate these two. That's why I like to stress my comments regarding how in all languages, take English, to take is equal to receive, and receive is equal to take. And thus, you decide what to stress, whether you say you received from me something or you took it from me, whereas it's the same thing. I give you something, you stretch your hand and take it. I'm not talking about theft and robbery, but that's the way we talk.
The Bible as Literature is a production of the Ephesus School Network.